It was a gloomy evening, the kind that made people wish they'd stayed indoors. The streets were empty, save for the occasional car speeding by with its headlights cutting through the thick downpour. The sound of the rain tapping against the sidewalk was the only noise that filled the air, a constant reminder of the storm that had overtaken the city. For most, the rain was just an inconvenience, but for a young man named Jack, it was just another part of his day. Jack had always walked home from work, even when it was storming. His apartment wasn't far, and he didn't mind the walk. It gave him a chance to think, to process the long hours at the auto repair shop, where he spent most of his time fixing cars that barely ran. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills, and Jack was used to getting by with what little he had. He'd never known a life full of luxury or comfort. He knew how to make the best of things, always trying to see the silver lining even when the streetlights flickered as he walked. His jacket pulled tightly around him, the hood over his head doing little to protect him from the rain. He wasn't in a hurry. There was no need to rush. As his boots splashed through puddles on the sidewalk, his thoughts were miles away, focused on everything and nothing at the same time. It was a routine for him. Finish work, head home, eat something quick, and then spend the rest of the evening tinkering with a project car or reading. But that night, something was different. Something caught his eye, something that made him stop dead in his tracks. Sitting on a bench under a large tree, barely visible through the sheets of rain, was a figure. At first, Jack thought it was just another person trying to escape the downpour. But as he drew closer, he realized that the person on the bench was a girl. She was hunched over, her shoulders shaking slightly. Jack couldn't see her face, but the way she was sitting, her body language, it was clear that she was upset. Instinctively, Jack slowed his pace. He had never been one to ignore someone in distress, no matter how strange the situation might seem. He approached the bench carefully, his footsteps making barely a sound against the wet pavement. As he got closer, he could hear the soft sound of crying, the gentle sobs that told him this wasn't just a casual moment of sadness. Something was wrong. "Hey," he said gently, not wanting to startle her. "Are you okay?" The girl didn't respond immediately, her head still lowered, her hands pressed to her face as she tried to hide her tears. Jack hesitated, unsure of what to do. He wasn't exactly an expert on comforting strangers, especially not strangers who seemed so lost in their grief. "Hey, it's all right," Jack said again, a little louder this time. "You don't have to be out here in the rain like this. Are you all right?" At his words, the girl looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. She blinked a few times as though trying to make sense of what was happening. Her face was wet from the rain, but her tears mixed in with it, making her look even more vulnerable. Her long hair clung to her face, and Jack could see the distress in her eyes, the kind of hurt that no one could ignore. I'm fine," she said, her voice trembling. She wiped her eyes quickly as though trying to regain some control. "I just need some time to think." Jack didn't believe her. He could tell by the way she looked at him, the way her words didn't match the anguish he saw in her expression. It was clear that she was going through something much bigger than she was willing to admit. "Look, it's pouring out here," Jack said, glancing around at the rain falling harder with each passing minute. "You're going to catch a cold sitting like this. I'm just a few blocks from here. Why don't you come with me? I can at least get you out of the rain." The girl hesitated for a long moment, her eyes flicking to the sidewalk, to the street, then back to Jack. Jack could see that she was torn, unsure if she should accept the help from a complete stranger. But then, as though making a decision, she stood up slowly. Her movements were stiff, as though she hadn't moved in a while, and Jack could see the deep sadness that seemed to weigh on her every step. "All right," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "I'll come with you." Jack felt a slight sense of relief. He didn't know what was going on with this girl, but he knew he couldn't leave her out there, especially not in the state she was in. He stepped closer, offering her the umbrella he'd been holding. She looked at it for a second, then took it from him with a faint nod. They walked together side by side through the rain. Jack tried to start a conversation, to ease the silence between them. He told her a little about himself, how he worked at a small auto repair shop just down the road, fixing cars and working late hours to make ends meet. But the girl didn't say much in return. She kept her head down, her shoulders hunched as she walked slowly as though the weight of the world was pressing down on her. Jack didn't mind. He wasn't one to push people to talk. If she wanted to share more about herself, she would. But for now, he was content with just getting her out of the storm. The walk was short, just a few blocks, but it felt like a lifetime. By the time they reached his apartment building, the rain was still coming down in sheets, and the world around them seemed muffled by the sound of the storm. "Here we are," Jack said as they stood in front of the building. He reached for the door, holding it open for her. "It's not much, but it's dry inside." The girl stepped inside the small lobby and Jack followed her. He didn't know why he felt so protective of her, why he felt like he had to help her. Maybe it was the way she looked, so lost and broken, or maybe it was just his nature to want to help people. Either way, he wasn't going to turn his back on her now. They took the elevator to the 3rd floor and Jack led her down the hall to his apartment. When they entered, Jack turned on the lights and gave her a brief tour of the space. It wasn't much, just a small living room, a kitchen in the corner, and a bedroom that barely fit a bed. It wasn't the kind of place anyone would want to be stuck in for long, but it was home. "I can make you something warm to drink if you'd like," Jack said, trying to break the silence again. "I've got tea, coffee, or hot chocolate." The girl shook her head slightly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "No, thank you. I'm fine." Jack wasn't sure what else to say. He watched her as she stood by the window, looking out at the rain as it continued to fall outside. She was still so distant, so closed off, and Jack couldn't help but feel that he wasn't going to get the full story from her anytime soon. He could tell that she was hiding something, but he didn't want to push her. "All right," Jack said finally. "I'll leave you to relax for a bit. If you need anything, just let me know. You can stay as long as you need." She nodded without saying a word, and Jack left her to her thoughts, retreating to the small couch where he sat, trying to make sense of the strange turn his evening had taken. There was something about the girl, something that didn't quite add up. She wasn't just anyone. He could tell by the way she carried herself, by the way she held herself together even in her obvious distress. But Jack didn't ask any more questions. For now, he was content to simply offer her a place to stay. Whatever had brought her to this point, he figured she'd tell him when she was ready. But little did Jack know, the girl sitting in his living room wasn't just any stranger. She was someone with a past far more complicated. The night passed quietly, with the soft sound of rain tapping against the windows. Jack sat on the couch, his thoughts swirling around the mysterious girl who had come into his life so suddenly. He couldn't help but feel a strange sense of responsibility for her, even though he barely knew her. The way she had looked at him, the pain in her eyes, it all felt so raw, so real. He wanted to help her, but there was only so much he could do. He could offer her a place to stay, but what else could he provide? As the hours ticked by, Jack tried to focus on the book he had started reading, but his mind kept wandering back to her. He could hear her moving around the apartment in the other room, but she didn't speak much. He had offered her tea or coffee earlier, but she had politely declined. She seemed lost in her own thoughts, and Jack didn't want to intrude. Eventually, he heard the soft sound of her footsteps as she walked into the living room. She was standing by the window again, staring out at the rain as it continued to fall. The silence between them felt heavy, but Jack wasn't sure what to say. He didn't want to push her, didn't want to make her feel uncomfortable. But he also knew that the longer she stayed in his apartment without talking, the more questions would build up in his mind. "I don't mean to pry," Jack said, his voice quiet but sincere. "But I want you to know if you want to talk, I'm here. You don't have to be alone with whatever it is you're going through." The girl turned to face him, her eyes slightly red from the tears earlier. She looked at him for a long moment as though weighing whether or not to say anything. Jack could see the hesitation in her eyes, the uncertainty. She was holding something back, something important. He could feel it in the air, a tension that seemed to hang between them. "I don't even know where to start," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's just everything, it's too much." Jack nodded, understanding more than she realized. Life had a way of throwing everything at you at once, and sometimes it was hard to make sense of it all. He couldn't pretend to understand what she was going through, but he knew what it felt like to be overwhelmed, to feel like there was no way out. "You don't have to explain everything if you don't want to," Jack said gently, "but if you do, I'll listen. I promise." The girl took a deep breath as though she was gathering the courage to say something important. She walked over to the couch and sat down, her body language still tense. She folded her hands in her lap and looked down at them for a moment before speaking again. It's just, my family, she began, her voice trembling slightly. They want to control everything. They've already arranged my life for me. My marriage, my career, everything. I'm supposed to do what they say when they say it. But I don't want that. I don't want to be a pawn in their game. Jack could hear the pain in her voice, the frustration. He could tell that this wasn't just about one thing. This was about a lifetime of being controlled, of feeling trapped by the expectations of others. He had no idea what it was like to grow up in a world like that, where every decision was made for you, but he could imagine how suffocating it must feel. I'm sorry, Jack said softly, his heart aching for her. That sounds really hard. The girl nodded, her eyes distant now as she stared at the floor. She was quiet for a long moment, as if she was thinking about what to say next. Jack didn't push her. He let her take her time, knowing that sometimes the hardest thing to do was open up about the things that weighed you down the most. Last night, when I left my house, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, I wasn't just running from my family. I was running from a life I never asked for. I was supposed to marry someone I don't even know, someone I've never met. I'm supposed to be happy about it, to smile and play my part. But I can't do it. I can't be a part of that world anymore. Jack listened carefully, his heart going out to her. He couldn't imagine being in her shoes, being forced into a life she didn't want. It must have taken a lot of courage for her to leave, to walk away from everything she had known. I don't know where to go now, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I don't have anyone. I've spent my whole life doing what they want, and now I'm just lost. Jack felt a surge of empathy for her. She was brave, far braver than he would have been in her shoes. To leave everything behind, to step out into the unknown, it was a decision that not many people could make. But somehow she had done it, and now here she was in his apartment, a stranger who had trusted him enough to take her in. You don't have to figure it all out right away, Jack said, his voice steady and reassuring. You can stay here as long as you need to. I'll help you figure things out if you want, but you don't have to face it alone. For the first time since she had arrived, the girl seemed to relax a little. Her shoulders, which had been tense, dropped slightly, as though she was letting herself believe for a moment that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of the mess her life had become. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't helped me. Jack smiled gently, feeling a warmth in his chest. He didn't know how he had ended up in this situation, helping a girl he barely knew, but something about it felt right. There was a deep sense of connection between them, one that went beyond their circumstances. Jack wasn't sure what the future held, but for the moment he was grateful to be there for her. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside the apartment, the storm felt a little less heavy. They sat together in silence for a while, each lost in their thoughts, but a quiet understanding growing between them. Jack had no idea what kind of life the girl had left behind, but he was beginning to see that she was more than just someone in need of shelter. She was someone with a strength that he could only begin to comprehend, and so the night passed. Jack went to bed, his mind racing with everything the girl had shared. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew that things had already started to change, for both of them. The next morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through the window, Jack awoke with a feeling he hadn't had in a long time. It was a sense of purpose, of knowing that no matter what, he had made a difference in someone's life. But he also knew that this was only the beginning. Whatever came next, he was going to be there to help her, to be the support she needed. They both had a long road ahead, but at least they didn't have to walk it alone. The rain had stopped by the time Jack woke up. The clouds had parted and the sun was beginning to shine through. The world outside looked different, as though it had been washed clean. And for the first time in a long time, Jack felt a sense of hope that things might just work out. As he got ready for the day, he thought about the girl still sleeping in the living room. He didn't know her name, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that somehow he had become a part of her story, and she a part of his. It was a connection that neither of them had expected, but one that would shape the course of their lives in ways they could never have predicted. And so, with the day breaking ahead of him, Jack knew that the next chapter of their lives was just beginning. The days following her arrival passed in a blur. Jack went about his usual routine, but there was always a part of him that remained focused on the girl. He tried not to pry too much. He knew that even though she had shared some of her story, there was still so much she was holding back. But Jack didn't mind. He wasn't there to force her to talk. What mattered to him was that she had a safe place to stay, somewhere she could begin to figure things out on her own, without the pressure of her past life hanging over her. Each morning, Jack would wake up and make coffee while the girl remained quiet in the other room. She had stopped crying at least, but Jack could sense the weight of her thoughts. She would sit by the window staring out at the world as it went by, lost in her own world. Sometimes Jack would join her in silence. Neither of them seemed to need many words, but the quiet moments felt comfortable, like they were both coming to terms with the strange connection that had formed between them. The girl, whose name Jack had yet to learn, had started to open up more, but only in small ways. She would occasionally tell Jack a little about her life, but her words were often guarded, as though she wasn't ready to share everything just yet. Jack didn't push. He could tell that she needed time, that she wasn't ready to let down her walls completely. But he also sensed that, little by little, she was starting to trust him. One afternoon, Jack came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table, a piece of paper in front of her. She had been writing something, but as soon as she saw him, she quickly folded the paper and hid it under her hands. Jack raised an eyebrow, curious, but didn't say anything. He had learned by now that pushing her for answers wasn't going to work. "Everything okay?" he asked, trying to keep his voice light. The girl hesitated before nodding, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Yeah, just thinking," Jack smiled gently. "I get that. Sometimes it helps to write things down." She looked up at him then, her gaze a little more focused than usual. "I guess so. It's just hard." "I understand," Jack said, his voice soft but reassuring. "Whatever it is, it's okay. You don't have to talk about it if you're not ready. I'm not going anywhere." There was something in her eyes when he said that, something that seemed to soften just a little. The walls she had built up around herself weren't gone, but they seemed to be crumbling bit by bit. Jack knew that her journey wasn't going to be an easy one. She had come from a world of wealth and expectations, a life that was dictated by others. To go from that to living on her own, in a modest apartment with a stranger, was a huge change. But somehow Jack could sense that she was beginning to find strength in herself. She was beginning to see that there was more to life than the path others had carved for her. Over the next few days, their routine settled into a kind of rhythm. Jack would go to work in the morning, and the girl, who still hadn't told him her name, would stay in the apartment. Sometimes she would disappear into the small bedroom for hours, only emerging when Jack returned in the evening. Other times, she would be at the kitchen table scribbling away in her notebook, the pages filled with words he couldn't quite read from a distance. Jack didn't press her for more details about her life. He figured that when she was ready, she would tell him. But it wasn't just about the girl's past. It was about the space they were both in now. Jack had always been someone who lived in the moment. He didn't like dwelling on the past, and he didn't want to focus too much on what had brought her to his doorstep. What mattered now was that she was safe, and that she had the time and space to figure out her next steps. One evening, after work, Jack came home to find the girl sitting on the couch, looking more at ease than he had seen her before. She was no longer curled into herself as if the world might close in around her. Instead, she had her legs tucked under her and she was holding a book in her lap, though she wasn't reading it. Her eyes were fixed on the window, watching the sun begin to set over the city. There was a softness in her expression that Jack hadn't noticed before. "You okay?" Jack asked as he walked into the room. She glanced up, meeting his gaze for the first time in a long while. For a moment, neither of them said anything. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a shared recognition that they were both trying to find their place in a world that seemed so big and overwhelming. "I'm okay," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I think I'm starting to understand that it's okay not to have everything figured out." Jack smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest. It wasn't much, but it was a step forward. He could see the change in her, the way she was slowly beginning to let go of the heavy burden of her past. "You don't have to figure it out all at once," Jack said, sitting down across from her. "One day at a time. That's all you can do." She nodded, her eyes softening as she looked at him. "Thanks, I don't think I've said that enough. I've been so caught up in everything I didn't really realize what you've been doing for me." Jack shrugged, not wanting to make a big deal out of it. "It's no trouble. You're welcome here. I want to help. I know it's not much, but I'm glad I can do something." There was a silence that followed. A comfortable one this time, not filled with the weight of uncertainty or unspoken questions. Just the quiet, mutual understanding that they had both come a long way in the short time they had known each other. Days turned into weeks, and the girl began to settle in. She didn't talk much about her past, but Jack didn't mind. Every now and then she would mention small things. A memory from her childhood, a story about her family, but they were always brief. She was still processing everything, trying to figure out who she was now that she had taken control of her own life. One evening, Jack came home to find her standing in front of a mirror, adjusting her hair. She had changed out of the oversized sweater she usually wore and into something a bit more fitted, a simple dress that seemed to fit her perfectly. For the first time, Jack saw her as more than just a girl in crisis. He saw her as someone who was beginning to find herself again. She caught him watching and smiled faintly, as if she had just realized how much time had passed since she had looked at herself in the mirror like that. I'm going to look for a job tomorrow," she said, almost as if she was trying to convince herself more than Jack. "That's great," Jack replied, his voice full of encouragement. "It's a big step, but I know you'll do fine." She nodded, her fingers brushing the fabric of her dress. "I feel ready. I've been thinking about what I want, about what I deserve, and I think it's time to take that first step. I'm not going to hide anymore." Jack could see the resolve in her eyes. She was no longer the scared, broken girl who had shown up on his doorstep. She was someone different now, someone stronger. And though Jack didn't know what the future held for them, he knew one thing for sure. The girl had come a long way, and there was no turning back. "I'm proud of you," Jack said, his voice genuine. "I really am." Her smile grew a little wider, and she looked at him for a long moment before speaking again. I think I might be proud of myself too." As the evening wore on, Jack could feel the shift between them. It wasn't just a change in her, it was a change in him too. She had reminded him of something he had almost forgotten. The power of taking control, of standing up for what you want. He didn't know where her journey would take her, but he knew that no matter what happened, she wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in a long time, Jack felt a deep sense of hope, knowing that no matter how uncertain the future was, they were both on their way to something better. The following weeks brought a noticeable shift in the atmosphere between them. The girl, who Jack now realized had started to feel like more than just a stranger, was taking small but significant steps toward finding her own path. Each day she seemed a little more comfortable in her skin, a little more sure of herself. Her confidence was growing, and Jack couldn't help but admire her strength. It had been nearly a month since she first arrived, soaked to the bone and broken in ways that were hard for Jack to comprehend. And now there was something different about her. She was standing taller, speaking more openly, even laughing at times. Jack had never been one to dwell on the past, but he couldn't help but wonder what she had left behind. What kind of life had she lived, and what kind of future was she building now? He never asked, though. He respected her space, understanding that she needed time before she could share everything with him, if she ever did. One morning, Jack found her sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in front of her. She had changed into a simple blouse and jeans, looking more put together than she had in a long time. She was reading through some job listings on her phone, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Good morning," Jack said as he entered the room, still in his work clothes. He wasn't used to seeing her so early, as she usually took a little longer to get out of bed, but today seemed different. "Good morning," she replied, her voice more assured than it had been before. "I've been looking for a job." Jack smiled, genuinely proud of her. "That's great. Anything catch your eye?" She nodded, tapping the screen of her phone. "There's a local cafe looking for a barista. I used to work in a coffee shop back home, so I think I could manage that." "Sounds perfect," Jack said. "If that's something you want to do, I think it could be a good fit for you." She hesitated for a moment, then set her phone down on the table. "I'm not sure," she said quietly. "I've been thinking about my options a lot. I don't know if I want to keep running from my past or if I should just embrace a new life, make a fresh start." Jack could see the conflict in her eyes. The decision to move forward wasn't easy, and the weight of her past still hung heavy over her. He didn't have the answers, but he knew that whatever choice she made, it would be hers to make, and that was what mattered most. "You don't have to figure everything out all at once," Jack said, sitting down across from her. You've already come a long way. One step at a time, right? She smiled faintly, looking up at him. One step at a time, she repeated softly. It was clear that she was still processing everything, her past, her future, what it all meant. But Jack could see the resilience in her, the quiet determination that she would make her way even if it took time. Later that day, Jack left for work, his thoughts lingering on the girl. He didn't know what the future held for her, but he hoped she would find peace, that she would discover a way to let go of the things that had held her back for so long. He believed in her. In his quiet way, Jack had come to care for her deeply, not just because of the kindness he had shown her, but because he had seen a side of her that no one else had. A side that was strong, even when she didn't believe it herself. When Jack returned home that evening, the first thing he noticed was that the girl wasn't on the couch as she usually was. The apartment was quiet, almost too quiet, and for a moment Jack wondered if something had happened. He glanced around, and that's when he saw the note on the kitchen counter. Jack, I'm going to apply for the job at the cafe. I'll be back later. Gee. The note was simple, but the fact that she had written it and left it there spoke volumes. She was taking control of her life, and while Jack had been part of her journey, he knew it was ultimately up to her to take the steps she needed to move forward. Jack sat down on the couch, feeling a sense of pride and peace wash over him. He didn't know what the future held for them, but he knew that whatever happened, they had both grown. The girl had come into his life unexpectedly, and in many ways, she had shown him what it meant to truly start over, to take chances and push past the past. Later that night, when Jack had just finished dinner, there was a soft knock at the door. He opened it to find the girl standing there, looking a little out of breath but with a bright smile on her face. I got it, she said, excitement bubbling in her voice. The job. They said I can start tomorrow. Jack's face lit up, a smile tugging at his lips. That's amazing. I knew you'd do it. The girl stepped inside, still smiling. I can't believe it. I never thought I'd actually get a job this fast. Like I said, you've got this, Jack replied, his voice warm with pride. I'm so proud of you, she smiled. A real smile this time, and for the first time, Jack saw her as she truly was. Not just the girl running from her past, but a young woman who was taking control of her future. It was a powerful moment, one that neither of them would ever forget. Over the next few weeks, the girl settled into her new job at the cafe. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave her a sense of purpose. Every morning, she would wake up early, get dressed, and head out to work. Jack could see the change in her, the way she carried herself, the confidence that was slowly returning to her steps. She was making a new life, and it wasn't easy, but it was real. In the evenings, they would sit together, talking about their days, sharing stories, or just enjoying the quiet. Jack could tell she was still processing everything, her past, her family, and all the things she had left behind. But there was something different about the way she spoke now. It was as if she had begun to find her place in the world again, and each day brought a little more clarity. One evening, as Jack was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, the girl came in, looking more relaxed than usual. She had a small grin on her face, and for a moment, Jack didn't know what to expect. I was thinking, she said slowly, sitting down beside him. I want to start over, truly start fresh. Maybe I'll move out soon, find my own place. I think I'm ready for that. Jack looked at her, surprised but supportive. You've come a long way, and if that's what you want, then I think it's a good idea. I'm not running away from anything anymore, she said, her voice filled with quiet strength. I'm choosing what comes next. It's my decision now. And just like that, Jack saw the final piece fall into place. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, moving forward with intention, and it was something to be proud of. The next chapter of her life was unfolding, and Jack knew that whatever came next, they both had a long road ahead, full of possibility. The weeks that followed were filled with small victories and quiet moments of reflection. Jack continued to watch the girl, whose name he had finally learned was Lily, find her way. There was a shift in the air around them. Something had changed. What started as a simple act of kindness had turned into something deeper, something that neither of them could have predicted. Jack had given her a safe space, but it wasn't just a physical one. It had become a place where both of them could heal, move forward, and rebuild their lives. Lily had started to settle into her new routine. Her job at the cafe was going well, and she had even made a few friends there. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She was learning how to navigate the world on her own, without the heavy influence of her family constantly hovering over her decisions. Every day brought new challenges, but Lily was beginning to face them head on, no longer looking over her shoulder at the life she had left behind. One evening, after a long day at work, Lily came home with a tired smile on her face. But there was something different about her that night. Jack was sitting on the couch reading a book when she walked in. He looked up and saw the determination in her eyes. "I think I'm ready," Lily said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "Ready to take the next step." Jack set the book aside, his attention fully on her. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath, her fingers playing with the edge of her sleeve. "I've been thinking about moving out. I feel like I've gotten to the point where I can do this on my own. I want to take the next step, find my own place, and start fresh." For a moment, Jack didn't know what to say. He had known that this day would come eventually. Lily was strong, and she had always had the determination to go after what she wanted. But hearing her say it out loud was different. It was a moment of realization for both of them. She was ready to stand on her own feet, to carve out a future for herself without relying on anyone else. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" Jack asked, his voice soft but genuine. Lily nodded, her eyes filled with a quiet confidence. "I think I am. I've been thinking about it a lot. I need to do this for myself, Jack. I've spent so long being told what to do, but now I need to make my own choices." Jack looked at her for a long moment. He could see the fear in her eyes, but also the strength that had grown over the weeks they had spent together. She wasn't the same girl who had come to him in the rain. She was someone new, someone who had learned to trust herself again. "I'm really proud of you," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've come so far." Lily smiled faintly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you. I don't think I could have done it without you. You've been like a guide for me." Jack shook his head, trying to brush off the compliment. "You've done all the work. I've just been here to help when you needed it." It was true. Jack had been there for her, but it was Lily who had made the decision to change her life. She had been the one to face her past and choose a future of her own. And that was something Jack could never take credit for. The next few days were filled with excitement and nervous energy. Lily started searching for apartments, looking for a place that would feel like her own. Jack had offered to help, but she had insisted on doing it herself. She was ready and she wanted to prove it. Jack respected that, even though he couldn't deny that he was going to miss having her around. The apartment they shared had been a temporary refuge for both of them, but Jack knew it was time for Lily to move on. It was what she needed, and though it was bittersweet, Jack was proud of her for taking the leap. One afternoon, a week later, Lily came home to announce that she had found a place. It was a small apartment not too far from Jack's, but far enough that she would be able to start living independently. She was excited, but there was also a sadness in her eyes, as though she was leaving behind a part of herself. "I think it's perfect," she said, sitting down beside Jack on the couch. "It's small, but it's mine. I can't believe I'm actually doing this." Jack smiled, feeling a pang of pride in his chest. "I'm so happy for you, Lily. You've worked hard for this." She nodded, her voice quieter now. "I know, but I'm also scared. I've never lived on my own before. I don't know what I'm doing." Jack put a hand on her shoulder, offering comfort. "It's normal to be scared. You've been through a lot, but you're not alone. You'll figure it out. And if you need anything, I'm right here." Lily smiled, a genuine smile this time, and Jack could see the gratitude in her eyes. She didn't need him in the way she once had, but she still appreciated his support, and that meant everything to him. The day Lily moved out was a quiet one. She packed up her things, and Jack helped her load them into her car. It wasn't a grand farewell, no big speeches or tearful goodbyes, but it was an emotional moment nonetheless. Jack stood by the door watching as she drove away, knowing that this was the moment she had been working toward. He closed the door behind him and sat down on the couch, feeling a sense of emptiness settle in his chest. It wasn't that he was sad for her. He knew this was the right thing for her. It was just that the apartment suddenly felt too quiet, too empty. For the next few days, Jack went about his routine, but there was a noticeable shift in the air. He missed the presence of someone else in the apartment, missed the quiet conversations, the shared meals, and the small moments of connection that had become so familiar. But he also knew that Lily was out there, making her way in the world. And that was enough. A week later, Jack got a call from Lily. She was settled into her new place, she told him, and she was doing well. She had even started making friends in the building and had found a new sense of independence that she had never known before. But the most important thing was that she had found peace with her past and was moving forward, one step at a time. "I just wanted to thank you again," Lily said over the phone, her voice filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you. You gave me a place to start over, and I'll never forget that." Jack smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "I'm just glad I could help. You did all the hard work." They both paused for a moment, letting the silence settle between them. There were no more words needed. They both knew that their time together had been a chapter in their lives, one that had helped them both grow in ways they never expected. As the call ended, Jack felt a sense of closure. Lily was no longer the broken girl who had stumbled into his life on a rainy night. She was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had taken control of her own destiny. And though he would always care for her, he knew it was time for her to fly on her own. Jack turned off his phone and sat quietly for a moment, reflecting on the journey they had both been on. They had each learned something from the other, and in some ways they had both healed. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Jack felt hopeful. He didn't know what was next for him, but he knew that, whatever it was, he was ready. The rain began to fall again outside the window, a soft, steady rhythm that reminded Jack of the beginning of their story. It had started with a storm, but now there was peace, and that was enough. The weeks after Lily moved into her own place were filled with quiet moments of change. Jack went about his days as usual, but there was a subtle shift in his life now that she was no longer living in the apartment with him. It wasn't that he didn't care about her anymore, he did, deeply, but there was something bittersweet about the way she had started a new chapter on her own. She had grown in ways Jack hadn't expected, and as much as he missed the connection they'd shared, he couldn't deny that he was proud of her. Jack found himself thinking about her often. The last time they had spoken, Lily had been excited about the new friends she was making and the stability she was beginning to find. She was still working at the cafe, but there was a sense of pride in her voice now, a far cry from the girl who had walked into his life with nothing but fear and uncertainty. She was making her way in the world, and that alone gave Jack a sense of peace. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that lingered in the apartment. It wasn't just the absence of her presence, it was the realization that both of them had undergone such significant changes. Jack hadn't realized how much he had come to care for Lily, not just as someone he was helping, but as a person who had become a part of his life. Even though they had grown apart in a physical sense, she was still a part of his thoughts, a quiet thread weaving through his days. One evening, Jack found himself sitting on the balcony of his apartment, a cup of coffee in hand. The weather was cooler than it had been, and the sun was beginning to set, casting a soft golden glow over the city. Jack loved these moments of quiet reflection, when the noise of the world seemed to fade away. It was during moments like these that he thought about how far he had come too. His life had changed because of Lily. She had reminded him of the importance of taking risks, of offering help without expecting anything in return. He had always lived a simple life, keeping to himself and focusing on his work. But helping her had opened something in him that he didn't know he had: compassion, connection, and a reminder that sometimes even the smallest actions could make a huge difference in someone's life. The sound of his phone ringing broke the silence, and Jack glanced down to see that it was Lily. He smiled, his heart lifting just a little. It had been a couple of weeks since their last conversation. He picked up the phone and answered with a simple greeting. "Hey, Jack." Lily's voice came through, light and cheerful. "How's everything?" "I'm doing all right," Jack replied, taking a sip of his coffee. "How about you?" There was a brief pause on the other end before Lily spoke again, this time with a hint of excitement in her voice. "Actually, I wanted to tell you something. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I think I'm ready for the next step." Jack's interest piqued. "What's that?" Lily hesitated for a moment before continuing. "I've been offered a promotion at the cafe. They want me to manage the place. I'm really excited about it, but I'm also a little nervous. I've never managed anything before, and I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of responsibility." Jack couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. It wasn't just about the promotion. It was about the fact that Lily had worked hard to get there. and now she was being recognized for it. She had come so far from the girl who had stepped into his apartment looking for safety. "That's amazing, Lily," Jack said, his voice full of encouragement. "I knew you had it in you. You've been working hard and you're ready for this." Lily laughed softly. "I'm glad you think so. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. But I guess it's a big step, right?" "It's a huge step," Jack agreed. "And it's well-deserved. You've earned it." They continued talking for a while longer, with Lily sharing more about the promotion and what it meant for her future. Jack listened, offering advice and support when needed, but mostly just letting her talk. He could hear the excitement in her voice, the sense of accomplishment that had replaced the uncertainty she had once carried. It was a relief to hear how far she had come, and Jack couldn't help but feel a little proud of the role he had played in her journey. As the conversation came to an end, Lily spoke again, her voice softer now. "I just wanted to thank you, Jack, for everything. You helped me more than you know, and I don't think I could have gotten to this point without your support." Jack smiled, his heart full. "You don't have to thank me, Lily. You did all the hard work. I'm just glad I could help in whatever way I could." They both fell into a comfortable silence for a moment before Jack spoke again. "You're doing great, and I'm sure you'll do an amazing job as manager." "Thanks, Jack," Lily said quietly. "I'll keep you updated on how it goes. I really appreciate everything you've done." "I'll be here cheering you on," Jack replied, his voice warm with sincerity. After hanging up, Jack sat for a while, letting the conversation sink in. He couldn't help but feel a sense of pride for Lily. She had faced so much uncertainty, and now she was moving forward with a confidence he hadn't seen in her before. It was a reminder that people could change, could rise above their circumstances, and create new opportunities for themselves, no matter how impossible it might seem at first. The next few days passed quickly, filled with work and the usual rhythm of Jack's life. But there was a shift in him too. Lily's success, her progress, had given him a renewed sense of purpose. He had been a part of something important, and he had helped someone find their strength. He wasn't sure what the future held for him, but he knew one thing: life had a way of surprising him, and he was more open to those surprises now. One evening, a month after their last conversation, Jack received a call from Lily. This time, her voice was even more excited than before. "Jack, you won't believe it," she said, practically vibrating with energy. "I got a second promotion. They want me to oversee multiple cafes in the area. It's huge, Jack. It's exactly what I've been working toward, and I can't believe it's actually happening." Jack couldn't contain his excitement for her. "Lily, that's incredible. I knew you could do it. You're really making a name for yourself." Lily's voice was filled with emotion as she spoke. "I couldn't have done it without you, Jack. You helped me realize that I was capable of so much more than I thought. You were the first person to believe in me when I didn't even believe in myself." Jack felt a lump form in his throat, touched by her words. "You were always capable of this, Lily. I just gave you a little push, but you did all the work. You're the one who made it happen." "I know," Lily said, her voice softening, "but it still means a lot to me. I'll never forget what you did for me." They spent the rest of the evening talking about her new responsibilities and what the future held for her. Jack listened, offering advice when needed, but mostly just basking in the pride he felt for her. She had gone from being a scared girl running from her past to a confident woman who was shaping her future, and as much as he cared for her, Jack knew that her success wasn't about him. It was about her strength, her determination, and her willingness to change. As the call ended, Jack sat back and reflected on everything that had happened. He had been a part of her journey, and that was something he would always carry with him. But now, Lily was on her own path, one that she had forged through hard work and courage. Jack didn't know what the future held for him, but he knew that he had been part of something special. He had helped someone find their strength, and in doing so, he had found his own. The rain began to fall outside again, the gentle rhythm of it calming Jack's thoughts. As the city outside grew quiet, Jack felt a deep sense of contentment. He was proud of Lily, proud of the person she had become, and proud of the role he had played in her life. It wasn't just about the big moments. It was about the small, everyday actions that had made a difference. And in the end, that was what mattered. Life had a way of surprising him, but Jack was no longer afraid of the surprises. He was ready for whatever came next.